All right. And so I don't even want to admit it, Rola here. I think after 25 minutes of trying to figure this out, we have figured it out. That's not fair. I have figured it out. You were here ready to go. No problem at all. This was completely on my end. And I pressed the live button and we're live. So we have Rola here with us today, who is a super cool, really well connected, awesome educator who, whilst is in the same city as me, we met entirely online and is all over Twitter. And I have to admit, I have used an example you gave a little while ago over and over again about your classroom with folding tables that I want you to talk about some more because I think it is so cool. So we have Rola today. Hi, Rola.
Hi, thank you for this great introduction. One thing is I just continue learning. I think that's the main, community that I usually join. And thank you for that, for saying that you're learning from me as I learn from you as well. So when we talk about the tables and the benches, flexible classrooms.
This blew my mind, by the way, and I've been using it over and over again with other teachers and even on this podcast. I think it is so cool.
Yes, yes, yes. So the flexible classroom setup is actually students need to move and students need to choose places to go, and it can get noisy if you're doing a lot of the hands-on skill thinking in the classroom. So this last summer I thought about it. How can I build my own furniture, or how can I ask someone to build the furniture, which was going to cost a lot of money if I had to design it. So then at Canadian Tires, I was just shopping, and then I saw these amazing folding tables and folding benches. I thought, what a great idea to replace all these solid desks and chairs that you have to pile up and move. And so brought them into the classroom. Kids love them because they change the classroom on a daily basis. If they have to go in the hallway to record or speak to their thinking, it's easy. If they're making something, they can take a table anywhere. They can use a bench as a table as well. So it's been a fantastic environment for flexible open space. Sometimes we put everything away and the kids use just the classroom as a huge maker culture.
So awesome. And so I've used this as an example for a few teachers, like I said, and what interests me is basically everyone says, wow, that's scary. Like, what a scary concept. And I guess, and so I try to drill down into what they're saying, and they often say things like, I miss that structure. How can I know they're going to do what I need them to do? How am I going to get through everything I want to get through? So I'm guessing people say similar sort of things to you. What are your responses to those?
My responses is really how you bring your classroom culture, basically. Once the kids are really taking ownership of learning and they are clear on their expectations and they know what they are working on, they definitely, I never lose the kids or lose their production or their initiatives in learning, because they are leading their learning. And so they know they're accountable for all their work. So wherever they go within the school, around the school, outside the school, they know that they have to come back and consolidate and speak to the learning. So once kids take that accountability and responsibility, then there are no conflict or any tensions within the learning concepts and learning culture.
It's like a really proper, authentic understanding of your expectations as a base.
Yes, and so it's a lot of everything is co-created. So it's not like a direct something that the kids are complying to do. They are part of the process, and I learn with them, and we know that together. And so the accountability comes in. It doesn't matter where the student is sitting or laying down. The accountability is they are responsible to their learning. So they have to speak, they have to clarify, they have to consolidate either with a partner or a team. And as well as a teacher, I even leave the room to go around and observe and give feedback. So when you're involved with the students and taking that initiative with them and that learning process, that really does not withdraw the students from their accountability, basically. So they can go anywhere within the school as long as it's in a distance that I can go and see them, not too far away.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because I bet that would strike fear in the hearts of many.
Yes, it does. It does. And because everything is co-created. So the
Like there's a
kids
sense of
work.
ownership from every stakeholder in the
Yes,
classroom, right?
exactly. And then they have to consolidate and either confirm or teach their classmates and reflect on the learning. That's the biggest piece, is that reflection piece too, about their new learning, and set their next steps. For all of us, basically what we encounter was challenging for us. So in that, accountability piece makes a huge difference in your whole learning culture that you're doing in class.
That's neat. So I've got a bunch of questions swirling around in my head, but the other day or yesterday, I guess, I had a conversation with some people taking a principal's qualification program, and a question came up that I found really interesting, and they asked me, like, what would I do if a teacher was throwing themselves at a trend rather than a fundamental learning for the student. And I sort of tried to drill down a bit and understand what they meant by that. And they said, well, what about a teacher who, for example, just loves this idea of STEAM, but doesn't put the groundwork in to make sure that the basics of science learning are done. And my sort of thought on that was, I'm not sure I see anybody doing that to a fault. Like, I think if someone's courageous enough to throw themselves at a new idea, then then they kind of will figure it out as they go, and their kids will help them figure it out as they go. And if it doesn't work, then they'll jettison it and move on. But what are your sort of thoughts of this? Like, because I was worried that, like, we often have a culture where we don't encourage teachers to take a risk. Like, I can imagine if you brought that idea of, okay, I'm going to create a class that's completely mobile and all of my tables and chairs are going to be folding, to a principal, they might just say, well, no. But like, if we can create a culture where we're saying yes, and then we'll figure it out, to me, that's an environment that could be more innovative. But what's your thought on that concern?
Well, if all learning is a process, so we have to take that into consideration. And if we don't take those risks and really captivate that process, we're basically not learning or reflecting on that process as well. So when you talk about STEAM, I mean, everything you do is cross-disciplinary in a classroom learning. So it's up to the teacher to really tie everything in. So yes, it is taking risk with the students, and it is important to let the students know you're taking risks with them and learning with them. And what's important is to reflect and reach for a specialist in that field as well, and get feedback. So those are all these important steps. So maybe involve the principal with you as well. And that's what happened. I've been lucky that I've had support from colleagues at the board as well, colleagues at the schools, and principal. And so having that learning as a process, that's the main thing, because there's nothing that is set as a recipe no matter what you do. And so those cross-disciplinary are important because the kids are communicating constantly. They're communicating orally, they're visually, they are communicating in written work. So everything that they're doing, they're pulling all those skills and concepts throughout the process as well. And so those are the kind of things that the teacher or the principal or you work as a community, as a colleagues, where you reflect on those new learnings and have those discussions are important as well with the students.
Yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense, right? And like, that's where we kind of got in my conversation with these teachers was, well, I guess if it's not working and they keep going and you're just hitting your head against the wall and you keep going after it's not working, that's a problem. But if you have a failure, and you recognize it's a failure, and then you learn from it and reflect on it and decide, how to move forward or not, whether you jettison the project or you improve on the project, then to me, I would hate to create an environment where somebody was uncomfortable in having that risk.
Exactly. And it's really based on reflections. I mean, on a daily basis, if you're not reflecting with your students, there really is no learning, because really reflection is the piece of experience, is the key to the process of learning. And also sharing that reflection is very important, being open about it. And as you said, like, I don't know, failure or mistakes or whatever you want to call it, along that process is important to bring that conversation in class. And we've done that over and over again. And if there's anything that neither me or the students can solve, we always reach for a specialist or someone we can connect with and get feedback as well. And that feedback is very important to be and open-minded in a sense that everybody learns together.
I like you saying open a lot. I like that. I mean, I think an open and honest reflection is what a great skill to teach a kid. It's pretty hard to do, even as a teacher or as an adult. It's pretty challenging to look back at something and be pretty honest about well, what things went wrong, but even what things went right. Like sometimes it's difficult to actually say, well, this is what went right. Let's do that again.
Yeah. Yes, for sure. It's building skills. I'm building my skills with my students as well. So it's all those learning lifelong skills that you want your students to acquire and you learn with them as well. And making that process so transparent with the community, the parents as well, and the principals or leaders or your colleagues, so that is the key to learning basically. And even just a quick talk in the hallway or across the classroom or anything, that is also the learning piece, and getting feedback and questions when others are questioning about what you're doing. That's even more very important as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So the way you're going is making me think about a different conversation. So I talked to Star Saxteen a little while ago, like a month ago. And so
Yes.
she's pretty famous for this no grading thing.
Yes.
So what is so if I've got imagining your classroom, okay, I've got folding tables and chairs, I got kids all over the place, some in here, some in there. They're going in a direction that they're choosing, not necessarily what you're choosing. How do you tackle this whole grade thing?
I believe that kids should not be graded because it's a process of learning. I believe that learning never stops. When you put the grade on, sometimes it stops at the end of learning. So what we do is, again, everything is based on co-creation of a criteria. And it's not a criteria that is basically a checklist. It's a criteria that has details. And a criteria becomes like a working document for us in class. So something we already know, something we need to persevere and learn more. And as we are working together, myself and the students, on those concepts or skills or curriculum expectations, we constantly go back and reflect on the criteria and add on. So what the kids in the end have, they have several multiple ways of showing their work. So it's a process. So it's not just being evaluated on the one task, is how they are progressing through their learning based on those co-created or co-constructed initiatives or criteria, as you want to call them. And the kids also reflect regularly. My classroom set up that the kids basically have no homework. We have a lot of consolidation during the day, and their work is to blog. They use any format for them. Is they have daily reflections. So some of them use Google Calendar for reflection. Some of them use a blog. Some of them use Google Sites. Any way to reflect and build that community. So when I'm assessing the kids, they're not being assessed on the single task. We're looking for assessment for and as learning as we go along, and based on several criteria, can the kids speak to those evidence? Can they screencastify their work? Can they identify? Are they accountable for that? Do they give feedback to their classmates? How well their learning is progressing with this concept? So because I'm, with the ministry, I'm still accountable for the grading for report cards. Then what we do is all those tasks that have gone through the whole process, then I create a rubric based on the achievement chart. But the rubric is created based on all the tasks that the kids have performed throughout this inquiry, if you want to call it, of the learning process. So, but the grade is determined with the students because I have one-on-one conversation, and we screencastify that conversation that goes home to the parents as well.
Oh, fantastic.
And so we judge together, yes. So the judgment, it shouldn't be just my judgment. They are involved in the judgment piece. So we sit down and together we look at the whole process. And so we determine together the grade. And so that's how the kids end up with the report card. So there's no surprises anywhere. And the report card comment speaks to the process, what we exactly did on the tasks.
I mean, to me, this is so interesting because on the surface, right, if you stop someone on the street and said, well, this teacher's marking and this teacher isn't, it kind of sounds like, well, I guess the grading is more and the marking is less, and this teacher's just not doing it. But actually, when you describe it, like when you go through it, not grading it is so much more robust.
Exactly. Yes.
And grading it. Like I don't, I could easily see how someone could argue, well, you've decided this is an 87 versus an 85. You know, I don't think so. I think you're wrong. Nah, 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 nah. But if you have all this backup, if I have a student that has sat down on multiple occasions and talked with colleagues and teachers, and like it's very robust, and it sounds like you're going to get a much more accurate grade. Really, it's actually like just better grading, not grading.
Yes, it is, because it's a process of learning. There's no way that, even for myself, when I think about my learning, I mean, I learn on a daily basis professionally as well. And so you cannot really, there's no limit to learning. And to put a grade on throughout the process, I find that a little bit, it gives the kids a limit. It limits them instead of determining the next steps. So having to look at the process and judging that process together, that it's so, the kids are so accurate with their learning because they are aware of so the skills as well. So we implement those skills as well. So we're not looking at only just knowledge and understanding, obviously. So we're looking at how their communications develop. So using the achievement chart, how they're thinking and the application, their analysis. So based on analysis, how did their learning evolve and progress? And so as we work throughout our also criteria and details, the co-created criteria, we also look at progressions. We're not looking at grading. So that kind of mindset develops students' achievement and perseverance more. And we are using also a variety of processes throughout our learning. So there's an integrative thinking piece, there's a designing thinking piece. So it's all of it, it's based on a process. So with that changes your whole analogy of really what is evaluation and assessment, right?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It becomes much more continual. Like
Yes.
like you say, the word process. I mean, it's just a continuous process. And when I guess it's time for me to get the report card, I tell you what it is at that point of the continuum, and it continues.
Exactly. And so my rubrics that I am accountable for report cards, it has multiple, through the achievement chart has a list of all the tasks. And so it makes it very transparent and visible for the student, for the judgment when we have that conversation together, which we screencastify and share with the parents as well. So the kids speak to it at home before even getting report cards, because they know where the judgment is. And we have to, some, like, learning never stops, and it's all connected throughout the year, obviously. So but then, as we say, we have to report on science and all the subjects, so therefore it's clear.
And there's no cheating the system, right? Like, I mean, I certainly talked, whether it's true or not, I've talked to students that in their mind, they'll say, well, I kind of got lucky on that test. Like, I don't think I knew it as well as I did. I got an 80 and maybe I didn't deserve it. I've heard that before. Or I thought I knew that material really well, but I just didn't show it on the test. Like, if it's a continual process, then one would assume it's a much more accurate representation of what that child really has learned, right? Which is
Yeah.
what the whole point of grading a test is.
Yeah, it's giving them opportunities to grow, giving them opportunities to reach, to continue to inquire. And so that is what is really most important. It's that continuum of progression of mindset and thinking that I continue to learn, and that is important. Then guessing the learning and giving them opportunities to evolve and learn with the learning as well.
Okay, so my little umbrella here that I've been under for this collection of podcasts now. You're number 10, by the way. It's very exciting. Starting to get some high numbers. So has been what is innovation? So I think the jury would be out. You definitely are an innovative teacher, so I need to ask you. So thinking about what is innovation, what do we mean by that, and so how do we foster it? How do we make sure it's something that happens at school?
Innovation, that's a big word. Innovation, you're innovating at any time. Basically, there are different levels of innovations, obviously. I mean, teachers have to take risks with the students. So innovations for me in my classroom is really risk taking, is that collaborative thinking, it's that tension of learning, creating together, learning from each other. So innovation is a huge day-to-day conversations, elaboration, critical thinking. So all of those things that create innovation. So there's no single definition of innovation, but innovation definitely is the tension and the evolution of the thinking skills in class.
Yeah, it's this thing I'm trying to get my head wrapped around because it seems like all of a sudden boards are starting to acknowledge innovation as being important, and there's principles of innovation. And I've discovered the other day that Ottawa University has an innovation cohort for their education program, and was thinking this kind of almost takes away from it, it seems, and talking about it like it's this new thing. I mean, teachers were innovative for as long as there's been teachers, as far as I can tell.
Yes, innovation is really looking at, well, it's reflecting and looking at what you are doing in class and the purpose of it, and how best are the students taking leadership in their learning. I mean, basically, to me, innovation is, again, a process. So it's not just like the one task or the one event. And so it's all about the thinking skills, right? And those are the most important thing when you say you're being innovator. It's not just like one direct learning, one page, basically one task.
Right. I'm a big fan of this word reflection keeps coming up. I mean, I have always believed it as important, but I'm liking that you're really weaving it into every component of education, like whether it be professional development for the teacher or learning for the student. It's really refreshing actually that you're mentioning it over and over again. I think it's pretty
Yes.
neat.
If you're not reflecting, you're not being innovative, and you're not changing things. So it's all about the change towards students learning, right? So
Well, it
I
helps
mean,
answer
there
some of
are
the
really
questions of
many
like,
different.
yeah, I certainly had teachers say, well, like, I'm doing a fine job teaching. It's the students that have a hard time learning. Like I get that. And when I hear that, sort of wherever that may be, um, trying to think of a response, and I guess it feels like maybe reflection is that response. Okay, well, let's reflect on what's going on here, and if it's working, then continue going with it. But if it's not, then maybe that's an indicator from your own reflection. Maybe that's an indicator that change needs to start happening.
And even if it's working, is why is it working? What can we do to make, to also progress with it? So it's not just like the one.
Right? It's not an on and off switch.
Yes, for sure. So innovation really is for me this year, it was a huge, again, learning of innovation in the sense of creating those tensions and having those values of each student's thinking together, and that compassion of learning with each other, not without judging. So for me, the highlight this past year this was most innovative for me. It's not just like about the maker culture, but also was how do we value each other's ideas? How do we learn from each other without judging? And how can we compassionately come up to a conclusion or interpret our ideas together? That was a huge
That's
innovation.
great. I mean, so many soft skills floating around, those sort of like hard science skills, eh? That's great.
Yes, it was a great learning for me and for my students, because we were using a new process, integrative thinking, and I was lucky that this is the class I had this past year were with me in grade 5, so they were 5 and 6. So we had already established quite a community of learners, and then we took on this new piece of integrative thinking this year, and my goodness, the whole value of thinking switched around, and the tensions became learning, and valuing each other's thinking was so important, and building that perspective of learning was a huge switch. And so that's what I would call most innovation for me this year with my students, and they talk about that, how our system of thinking switched.
So do you want to sort of let us in on the kernel of that system? Like, how is it that you go about choosing what you choose to do, or what is it that was the big switch this year for you?
Well, they're so basically, first we look at real world issues connecting to our curriculum. So provoking students thinking with that. So then students start looking at causes. So we take a lot of models. We either collect data to come up to interpret the information and come up to a conclusion so we can discuss things. We can take two opposing ideas and value each idea, and then come up to that kind of not conclusion, but interpretation of the idea. We used models that relates to causes and effects. So using those thinking models really gets the students not only to learn from each other as a community of learners, but also valuing each other's ideas and learning and connecting those thinking, the thinking together, and basically building that huge learning community.
Oh man, well, that sounds all right.
It's yes.
Yeah, I
So
want to be in grade 6 next year.
yeah, well, I'm looking forward to next year because it's interesting to have a new group of students who hasn't,
Oh, right, because you've
I'm
done
not
2
sure
years
where they
in
are
one
at.
group.
So
Yeah.
we're really building, right? It's different. I think having students 2-3 years in a row, it makes a huge difference as well. And so it motivates me to learn something new with them, right? So those are the kind of important skills that you take as a teacher, is learning with your students.
Awesome. Well, I feel like I learned a lot today. I'm gonna have to go reflect on that later, Rola. Thank you.
I reflect on a daily basis. Every time I see a tweet, I'm like, oh.
It's fantastic. So thanks so much for making the time to come by and get through all our glitches to have our conversation today. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate that.
All righty, we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks. Bye.